Welcome to the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev, where we explore and share experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week from across the games industry, helping you make the best game you can. Stay tuned for today's episode. Good morning, Overload Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Dev Talk, talking to game developers from across the world to bring experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week. Today, I am joined with Daniel Black from Big Cow Studios to talk about his first game, The Last Time. Daniel, talk about yourself first, please, and how you got into the games industry.
Hi, Adrian. Like you said, my name's Daniel. I think how I got into the industry is a little bit different from most developers, and you could say that I'm kind of still trying to get into the industry. So I don't have a technical background, nor do I have a sort of artistic or animating background, and I haven't worked in a game studio before. I studied Chinese at university, and when I graduated, I was working for PricewaterhouseCoopers as a strategy consultant. And after that, I was working as a civil servant. And it was only about a year ago that I sort of had a change in my perspective on life, and decided, much like yourself, that I kind of wanted to be my own boss and pursue my own dreams and trying to make my own thing happen. So I started like learning about game development, and over the course of a few months, made a game for a game jam. Started working on my own ideas, and then it was only in April of this year that I quit my job to see if I could make it a full-time thing and start working on this game, and that's how I started making The Last Time.
Wow. Okay, so that's just through passion and persistence took you to games.
Exactly. It was a complete leap from a completely different career into this. Like I said, there was no there wasn't the kind of like usual path that one might take to becoming an indie dev.
Cool. Yeah, I get you. Out of curiosity, what is a civil servant exactly, just for those who are abroad?
Boring government work, basically.
So we're talking like administration, bureaucracy, and maybe Quango and such.
That kind of thing, yeah.
Okay. So tell me about your studio then. Big Cow Studios. Like how many people? What's the structure and stuff like that?
Sure. So, well, it's quite simple. So, Big Cow Studios is actually just synonymous with Big Cow, which is me. It's just myself, a one-man team. I am, for The Last Time, the game that I'm working on, I am collaborating with somebody who's doing the audio, but he's not an employee. He's sort of someone that I'm outsourcing some work to. Initially I was unsure about kind of advertising my game or myself under that banner. But the more I did sort of networking amongst indie devs, I realized how much of the marketing side of it is just calling yourself something. So I went from saying, "Hey, I'm Daniel, and I'm a guy who'd kind of like to be a game developer," to just saying, "Okay, yeah, sure, I'm a game developer. This is the game I'm working on. Here's my business card." And it's it's kind of that easy, really, just to label yourself as something. Big Cow Studios is just me.
Cool. Easy to label yourself. So tell us about your first game, even the last time, and what you wanted the player to experience.
So The Last Time is basically inspired by every adventure game that I've played that has had an emotional impact on me. Because I'm a big fan of sort of interactive storytelling in games, and for me, it's important for an engaging narrative to have some agency and choice over the narrative, which is what led me to start creating the Last Time. So it's a point and click adventure game with a focus on the story and having a strong interactive narrative. So while the gameplay and aesthetics remind people of a classic point and click, a lot of people say immediately it reminds them of a Monkey Island or some other classic adventure. But the narrative is focused on that strong interactive story. I'm a big fan, particularly of Quantic Dream and Heavy Rain and such. It's inspired by Telltale as well. Um, and the idea for the story, it just came from a small seed of an idea that I had when I was on public transport once. This idea of an old man who had to get back into a kind of dangerous lifestyle one last time, and everything else grew from that.
Mm. So I've played the demo,
Yeah,
and what came to mind first thing is not Monkey Island. No game really came to mind when it came
mm,
to inspiration. But as you were talking, what did come to mind was a game from 10 years ago called Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy.
yes.
Yes,
So
you've heard of this then.
yeah, well, I haven't completed that. I've downloaded it. I've been playing it. So that's also made by Quantic Dream, who
Mm.
went to make Heavy Rain a few years later. So yeah, it's interesting and quite flattering actually that you should think of that because, like I said, Quantic Dream are one of my inspirations.
I say that one because that's the only real point and click narrative story adventure game I've ever really played. And
Mm,
I remember predominantly playing the demo for that back in the day,
yeah,
and it was an amazing game with regards to narrative. And it's that's one of the reasons why I really liked this one, even though it's just a demo. That's one reason why I liked it because, well, multiple choice, all sorts of decisions could go anywhere, and so well, you just saw it in the demo, and it was really cool.
thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you like
In
that.
cool, yeah. It's, but in the demo,
Mm.
I noticed that he made a few references to copyright and music and such. Nice inside joke there.
Yeah,
And it was a little cliche. However, the when the policeman walks into the room, which 90% of it is in darkness, they switch on the light. It's obviously something big was going to happen then.
cool.
And then you go downstairs again. Oh, the closet's open. Oh, okay. I have a very strong idea what's going to happen now as soon as I walk into the next room. And then boom, yes, your mate Darren, isn't it?
Yes, that's his name.
You his he's been held hostage. So it's like, wow, okay, that was obviously going to happen. And then
Well,
I'm curious. I'm curious in general. Is there a way to make the character stay alive, or do we not find that out at all until the full game?
sure. So as for it being kind of obvious what was going to happen, so like as you pointed out, you walk down and the closet's open, so there's very deliberate kind of foreshadowing and building up
Hmm.
to it. So before you walk in there, you're like, uh-oh, yeah, so something's bad's going to happen. So that's so the way that I made that those scenes play out was kind of like a deliberate building of tension. As for whether or not you can keep Darren alive, so because that's at the very beginning of the game, and then there's a 40-year time jump, it's too early to have like a big branch in the story. So Darren will die regardless of your choices, but the way that he dies will be different depending on your actions, and then your choices
Ah,
will be referenced in the narrative a little later on, and then much later on in the game. So even though it doesn't
wow.
affect core elements of the plot, the narrative, insofar as dialogue options that you have later on in the game, will still be influenced. And also later on in the story, there will be more kind of branching as far as plot goes. But at this stage, it's just a kind of narrative change that's referenced, kind of 40 years later in the storyline.
That's very deep. That's quite complicated.
And
Wow, that's
also
really cool.
and another intention that I had was um, so obviously that there's the issue in kind of non-linear adventure games of choice versus illusion of choice, and
Hmm.
so even so there's elements in the game where you will have more choice and control over what happens, and but I wanted it to be that even in points in the plot where a particular thing has to happen for the sake of the game continuing, I still want to make the player like feel like they have agency over it, and even if the end result is the same, like how it plays out can be different. Because I find it much more interesting as a player to be involved in a plot element rather than have it just told through a cutscene. So that
Hmm.
that was my intention.
Yes, I get you. That's cool. Cool way. So it's more to the imagination, so play can fill it in and experience it rather than see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's
So
really fun. It's really fun watching all of the people who've been doing YouTube Let's Plays of it, and watching people play the demo when I took it to the London Anime and Gaming Convention a few weeks ago, because it has the emotional impact on people that I want, and there's a range of moods, a kind of roller coaster that people are taken on, because people are laughing and they're scared at other times, and then there's really like tense moments where people are kind of really struggling with what decision to make, and that's the kind of experience that I wanted the players to have. So that's very rewarding to see.
Okay, so the emotions and struggles are all over the place. That's great, exactly what you aim for. So tell me, Daniel, how did you go about promoting the game? What strategies worked and what didn't work so well?
Sure. So marketing has been, well, as with a lot of this, it's been quite a new thing to me. I'd say that I started doing stuff to do with marketing a little over 2 months ago, actually, even though it feels like it was longer. So I set up a website and a development blog, Twitter account, Facebook page for Big House Studios, and so all of those usual channels. And then more recently, the kind of second stage is that I launched a Kickstarter campaign a couple of weeks ago. So that's kind of um, achieved some marketing in and of itself. It's kind of chicken and egg situation. Like the Kickstarter helps get some publicity, but also I need to gather publicity elsewhere in order to drive that towards the Kickstarter. And in terms of what's worked well, I've been very surprised with how Twitter has turned out, because before a couple of months ago, I didn't really like Twitter. I didn't use it. I didn't like the idea of it. But in just over 2 months, I've gone from having 7 followers on Twitter to over 450 followers, and ended up not just using it as a marketing tool, but a networking tool. And I've become a part of a sort of Twitter adventure game development community, which has been really helpful and supportive. So that's been a win. And I guess I would advise anyone who, like myself, wasn't really sure about Twitter, just give it a try, and you might be surprised. I've found that getting followers on Twitter has been a lot easier than getting likes on Facebook, which in turn has been a lot easier than getting sign-ups to the mailing list, which I had on the website, so that people could be informed about when the Kickstarter was launched. And I think that that kind of correlates with how useful those channels are, because even though on Twitter it's very easy to tweet and get lots of followers, very few people will actually see something that you've tweeted because there's so much in their feed. Meanwhile, with a Facebook page, I think more people will see a post if they've liked something on a Facebook page, but it's harder to get followers. And obviously, to get an email mailing list, that's your most direct way of communicating with people, but it's very hard, in my experience, to get people to sign up on the website for that.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's typical conversion rate issues by the sounds of it.
Like,
So, aside from the Kickstarter, how is it you're going about funding the game?
well, it's just two things. So it's the Kickstarter, and then everything else is just savings that I've made from the last couple of jobs that I've worked. So I wouldn't necessarily, to be honest, I wouldn't like advise people to kind of eat into their savings in order to make a game. Obviously, it's everyone else's decision to make on their own terms, and it depends on what financial position you're in and whether you've got like people to support. But fortunately, because I don't have anyone else to support, I thought now was as good a time as any to go ahead and try, because otherwise I might not get the opportunity to give it a chance.
Oh, I understand, definitely. Now or never kind of thing.
Yeah.
How did you go about QAing the game and getting feedback for it?
So there's been a few different stages of that. So in the first instance, it was, and this wasn't really QA or necessarily useful feedback, but it was just a way of getting the game out of my bedroom, and seeing some people playing it. In the first instance, it was just showing it to a few friends. After that, I looked to sort of widen the pool of people playing it, but I went to like gaming related sort of networking events, and had other game devs play it and get feedback from them. The next stage was I did a sort of small like online release of the demo, not like a wide public one, but I went to adventuregamers dot com, I believe, and I posted in a forum there asking for feedback on the demo, because at the time that's what I thought was my target audience. I thought that it was kind of the hardcore adventure game players. Though sort of on a side note, since then I've actually realised that my audience has been a lot broader than that, which has been good. But then the sort of biggest sort of release I've had is when I released the demo publicly a couple of weeks ago in conjunction with launching the Kickstarter and the green light, which has actually been successful. It's been greenlit now, which is good. But yeah, so since releasing it online, it's had over 10,000 people play it, and it's a little hard to conceive actually, like going from seeing it in people's hands and seeing people playing it to having this statistic on a website telling me that over 10,000 people played it. And so yeah, it's been interesting to see the ratings and see all the comments it's had, and that hasn't been like QA in a technical sense, because I'm not getting bug reports and stuff. And I think that'll come further along in the development stage. But at this point, it's been a very useful way of kind of gauging the reception of the game generally, and seeing people's comments.
I get you. So you got it out there, and you just seeked gamers to play it.
Yeah, I think
Well,
further down the line, I'll need more specific QA in order to root out all the bugs and make sort of improvements based on people's feedback later on. That's actually one of the reward tiers on my Kickstarter, is you can get beta access to the game months before the release, which will allow you to sort of potentially influence how the final product turns out with your feedback. So that'll be one way of doing it.
Interesting stretch goal. Not stretch goal. Interesting goal in general on Kickstarter that they can actually
Yeah.
shape the game and the final product. So speaking of the game, what was cut from the game and why?
So since sort of like planning out the story structure, I've retained most of the story elements, but in as far as cutting things goes, as I've got further along in development, I've realized that I can make the game more efficiently than I originally imagined. And this is a mindset that I kind of learned from when I did a Ludum Dare game a few months ago called Don't Choke, which was quite well received, and that was a sort of short rat battle adventure game. Obviously, doing a game in 48 hours makes you think more about what is the really core part of the game, in this case, the story, and how do I get that across. So with the last time, for instance, in the demo, there's a point where you get to the house, and you're at the front door, and you can interact with like the doorbell and talk to Darren and knock on the door and stuff. Originally, I had that planned on being more complicated. You'd get to the house, and then no one would answer, and you wouldn't be able to get in, and you'd have to like go around the back and find a way of getting in through the back door. But I cut that out and simplified it for a couple of reasons. One was that it would just add development time, a lot of development time that could be made a lot shorter. But the other reason was that I realized that it wouldn't really add anything to the game. I was just adding an obstacle for the sake of having an obstacle, because it's a point and click and there need to be puzzles and obstacles. Whereas actually, at this point in the game, for the sake of the pacing, it was just kind of needlessly blocking the story. So that's a sort of new decision process that I've had, is to focus on telling the story as best as possible, and sometimes that means just more efficient development, which is great.
Yeah, I understand that. Getting to the point quicker. So, what was the biggest thing you learnt while working on the game?
I think what I've just told you might be the biggest thing that I've learned. Is just
So,
thinking about
getting to the point and not having too many puzzles for the sake of having puzzles.
sure. exactly. Or if you have puzzles, they need to be something which kind of adds to the game and aren't just there for the sake of it. And there will be more puzzles. There are puzzles further along in the game, including some stuff which I've already developed, which isn't in the demo yet. But yeah, making that more a part of the narrative, and not specific to puzzles as well, but development in general, is to, rather than just kind of dive into something as soon as you've got an idea, really think about it and think about how you're going to make it and think about what's going to be important for the player. Um, and also like don't not reinventing the wheel has been a massive one for me. Not just in this game, but since I started doing game dev stuff, is if there's already tools out there for something like. But I think I might be getting ahead of myself. I think you wanted to talk about third-party tools as well, right?
A little bit, yeah. That's further down though.
Okay. So I'll hold on to that thought. But yeah, that's another thing that I've learned is if there's a really good tool for something, then use that rather than spend ages trying to develop something yourself, which probably won't even be as good.
Yeah, work smarter, not work harder.
Exactly. Yeah, it's definitely about what you produce rather than how much time you spend on something.
Mm. So, what was the worst thing that happened, and how did you overcome it?
Hmm. I was thinking about that one, and actually, thankfully, there hasn't really been any terrible thing that's happened. Um, but one thing that's come up recently that has been not a terrible thing that's happened, but just something that I've had to kind of adapt to and learn how to react to is um, the challenge of getting your game of dealing with it once your game is kind of out there and is being played by thousands of people. And I think a lot of developers will be able to relate to this. When you make something as kind of your baby and you're very protective of it, but also you're very aware of all of the flaws, all of the bugs, all the things that you want to improve. So it can be kind of hard to show other people your game and have them play it and see their reactions. And I noticed this. I was at the Develop conference in Brighton last week, and sorry, a couple of weeks ago, and I saw these great games where the people showing them were being really apologetic about it. Oh, sorry, that's a bug. That's not supposed to happen. Blah blah. Blah. Even though to me, they were just these great games, and I wasn't seeing these things. So yeah, as a developer, I've had to learn to not worry so much about all the flaws that I see and all the things that I want to improve, and just kind of let the game go out there and be okay with with people playing it. And it's I've been very pleasantly surprised with the reception it's had. Actually, it's had pretty overwhelmingly positive reviews. But I think another challenge is dealing with negative criticism, and it's yeah, it seems illogical. Like even if more than 90% of comments are positive, like strangely, if you just get the odd negative feedback, then emotionally, if you're sensitive, like to be honest, I am, that can be hard to deal with. But it's been a very good exercise for me because obviously, um, from a rational point of view, you need to be able to not blow these things out of proportion, and obviously it's a learning experience. It's important to get that feedback as well. So I've managed to kind of like balance how I feel about that feedback and how I see it, but it's been a learning curve.
Mm. I get you not to blow feedback out of proportion. Yes,
Yes,
so and see how you can work around it or let it improve the work.
exactly. It's a valuable
So
experience.
exactly. So what was the best game dev purchase you made? Whether it was a software license, a top quality piece of hardware or equipment, or simply a comfortable chair and a good desk.
Actually, yeah, comfortable chair is an important one. I'm really glad that I've got the chair that I have. I wish I had room for a bigger desk. Sadly, I don't. As far as software goes, there's a asset for Unity 3D called Adventure Creator,
Uh-huh.
which you can see at adventurecreator.org, and that's by Icebox Studios, the Twitter handle for the guys. I think Chris Icebox. And so it's a complete adventure game toolkit, which allows you to make adventure games without a single line of code. And for me, this has been an absolute godsend because it meant that, I mean, I did start learning, coding and stuff about a year ago when I started looking at game dev stuff. But like I said, I've since realized there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And what Adventure Creator is a complete, essentially, it's a adventure game engine that gives you control of everything, all of the variables and dialogues, inventories, pathfinding, interactions with things in your environment, menus, saving, loading. It takes care of everything and gives you a lot of control over everything you would want to do, whether it's a 2D adventure game, 2.5D or 3D, or even like a first-person one. It gives you a lot of control and allows someone like myself who's more focused on the design and the writing to focus on that rather than spend a lot of unnecessary time on coding when there's already a perfectly good asset in place. And it's only, I think it's something like 60 or 70 euros, which I guess would amount about $100 or so. It's about 60 British pounds. And so for anyone who is interested in making an adventure game, I strongly recommend that they have a look at Adventure Creator. And there are other toolkits out there for making adventure games, but because Adventure Creator is for Unity 3D, it allows you to publish to all of the different platforms. So that's a big bonus in my mind.
That's amazing. I think today's interview that I've released talks about Adventure Creator as well. He used it as well in his Unity game. So that's, wow, great to hear it again.
It's been becoming increasingly popular, and it deserves to be even more so because it's a great asset, and the publisher is really helpful. He actually included a feature in the latest update that I requested, and he's really good with responding to technical issues on the forum. So it's a great asset from a great publisher, and it's continuously growing. So it's a good time to get involved in the toolkit.
Golden age of gaming, or game development, certainly. So speaking of which, what game dev related book, lecture, or learning resource can you recommend?
So I was thinking about this. There hasn't actually been a specific learning resource that I've really relied on so far. So whenever I've needed to, I've had an issue, I've basically Googled it or looked for a YouTube video on it and found it. So I suppose the good thing about the internet nowadays is that pretty much any question or issue you've come across, there's a good chance somebody else has already had that issue and asked about it on a forum and got an answer. So I guess Google has been my resource.
Great. So like an Evernote or Trello, do you have a useful or productivity enhancing software, app, extension, or website worth sharing?
I probably should, because it would probably help me to be more organized, but I haven't actually used any of that software. So if you've got any suggestions for me, I would be open to it, but unfortunately I don't think to share.
Well, I use Notepad a lot to record and jot down things, and pen and paper right now, so all sorts of stuff.
That's to be honest, that's what I do. I just I guess it's kind of low tech, but if I have to-do lists or anything I need to remember, I use pen and paper. I have different files on my computer. I use Excel a bit for recording, things that I need to do and deadlines and stuff. But I don't use any sort of fancy organizing software.
That's all right. So Daniel, what advice can you give to aspiring game developers, small indie studios, and people trying to get to where you are today?
I think my first piece of advice would probably be to advise people not to specifically try to get to where I am, because I don't really think I am yet to reach a point where I am something for people to aspire to. I think because I haven't made it. Though you know what? Having said that, one thing that's kind of really surprised me in a really kind of sweet but also kind of surreal way is that I have actually been inspiring people, and some people I've had, yeah, like I wrote an article which was featured on Gamer Sutra called 5 Tips for Surviving as a Stay-at-Home Indie Dev, which was very popular, and I had people messaging me saying how it inspired them. And more recently, I was part of what inspired somebody to quit their job and make a game and do a Kickstarter. I've had other people on Twitter saying that I'm inspiring. Yeah, which is strange because, like I said, it's not like I've made it. But I guess if you are kind of thinking about making the plunge and you want to get into game dev and become a game designer, I wouldn't say throw in everything and quit your job, but I would say just start making something. And if you're at a point where you've got ideas and you're very creative, but you haven't really done any game dev, and the whole thing looks like a big scary thing. Like I said, that there's so many tools that make it relatively easy to do the actual development side of things. So just start making something and see where it goes. That would be my advice.
Just start and
Yeah.
see where it goes.
Exactly.
Okay. So, Daniel, what is next for you, and what's the best way to contact you?
Well, what's next for me is I'm going to see how this Kickstarter goes. It's got a couple of weeks remaining, and it's 2/3 of the way to its goal, so it's looking okay. Yeah, I'm going to finish this game. It's going to be released on Steam because it's been greenlit, which is fantastic. It's going to be released early next year. And yeah, and then see what happens after that. Will I continue making indie games? Will I join a studio? Will I do something completely different? Who knows? But yeah, as I can only see as far ahead as finishing this game, and after that, who knows? And yeah, as far as contacting me goes, so there's www.bigcowstudios.com, where you can sort of get my contact details, which is Daniel@bigcowstudios.com, and you can read my dev blog and other news. You can reach me on Twitter at @bigcowstudios, and there's the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/bigcowstudios, and that's everything.
Okay. Well, Daniel, it appears that out of time for this episode. It was great talking to you, and a few things to consider, especially as you don't quite consider yourself something to aspire to, although you have inspired people, as you say.
Yeah, not deliberately, I assure you.
That's fine. I think that's the best way around it. Not deliberately inspiring people, just adding that value and sharing the experiences, and people take it for what it is and they absorb what they need to or want to.
I think that's a good way of looking at it.
I wish you well in your Kickstarter. Frankly, yeah, because it's more than 2/3 there and not even halfway or something of the sort, then it looks, from a statistics point of view, looks pretty secure.
I hope so. Yeah, I keep reminding myself that it's tough because I'm at the plateau stage where every pledge is half won, but it's hard come by. But yeah, it's normal to have a plateau and then an uptick at the end. So hopefully there'll be a lot more backers coming in towards the end.
That's all right, to be expected. Stay tuned, Overload Nation. More videos to come.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev. If you are a game developer that wants to get your name and game out there and to share your experiences and stories, or you have feedback or opinions of the show, then contact me at info@gameoverload.co.uk. That's info@gameoverload.co.uk. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode, more to come.